I can hear. Welcome. I declare this meeting of the Port Phillip City Council open, and I welcome members of the community that are here tonight. The City of Port Phillip respectfully acknowledges the Yalukut Willem clan of the Boomwurrung. We pay our respects to their elders, both past and present, and we acknowledge and uphold their traditional relationship to this land. Council has a local law that determines how this meeting will be conducted. There is time allotted in tonight's agenda for public question time. During public question time, members of the public can ask specific questions on general matters other than those relating to a topic that's on the agenda for tonight. Members of the public are only to ask specific questions and shall not provide any statements or contextual comments relating to that question. Consequently, the official minutes of the meeting will only record the question asked and any response given. The number of questions that a member of the public may ask shall be at the discretion of the chairperson. There is also an opportunity for members of the public to ask a question and/or make a comment on a specific item on tonight's agenda. This will be done prior to Council considering the item. We encourage comments or questions from the public that are directed through the Mayor, are not defamatory, abusive or objectionable in language or substance, but rather are presented in a spirit of mutual respect of the Council and the community. And we ask all speakers to abide by the direction of the Chair. If you wish to ask a question or speak to a report, please complete the blue form that's available at the table just outside the chamber and hand it to a staff member. I encourage you to limit your questions and comments to around 3 minutes and to avoid repeating any points that have already been made by other speakers. Please note that all council meetings are now being live streamed. Live streaming and recording allows the community to watch and to listen to the meetings in real time, providing greater access to council decision-making and debate, and improving openness and transparency. The live stream of this meeting is available on Council's website, and the recording of this meeting will also be available a few days after the meeting on Council's website and YouTube channel. The cameras will film and record councillors at this meeting. However, care is taken not to film or record images of the members of the public. If a member of the public asks a question or makes a comment about an agenda item, they will not be filmed, but their voice will be heard in the live stream and recorded. So please also note, in accordance with Council's local law, that this meeting cannot be filmed or audio taped unless permission is granted by the Mayor. Okay, councillors, we'll go to the agenda now. First up, it's apologies, and we're all here, so there's no apologies. Item 2, which is minutes of the previous meeting. Councillors, the minutes of the ordinary meeting on February the 7th, 2018 have been circulated. Any questions regarding these minutes? There are none. If I can have a motion to confirm these minutes. Councillor Simic and Councillor Baxter to second. Councillor, I'll now put this motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Item 3 is declarations of conflicts of interest. Does any councillor have a conflict of interest in any matters being discussed at tonight's meeting? There are none. Petitions and joint letters, item 4, and we have no petitions or joint letters. Item 5, sealing schedule. Councillors, we don't have any documents that require sealing tonight. And we'll go to item 6, which is public question time. And councillors, we've got 12 people who have requested to ask a question on tonight's agenda. Yep. So, and I'm going to take them as the order that they've been written, that they're written here. And as I mentioned earlier, I'll ask you to keep to 3 minutes, please. Mr. Andrew Lord. Miss Lord, if you would come forward, please. If you could sit in the chair, pop the microphone on and state your name and suburb, that'd be great.
Andrew Lord, 18...
Is that microphone on? Thank you.
Is that working?
Yeah, that's better.
Andrew Lord, 18 Dalgety Street, St Kilda. Councillors, As a resident of Dalgety Street and a father of 2 young girls, I address my question to all the councillors, but specifically to Councillor Simic. As a councillor and director of the PPHA and the trust related to it, are you not failing or either and/or duty of care to the residents of the Regal or the residents of St Kilda? Or more likely both, by failing to take timely action to protect both groups from the violence, drugs and prostitution that continues to occur both within the Regal and the surrounding streets that we have to live?
Do you have any other questions, Mr Lord?
No.
Thank you. I'll ask an officer to respond to that. No? Oh.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I won't be addressing the questions to Councillor Simic directly, but I can provide an update on what Council is doing in relation to this matter.
That'd be great, Ms Jeffs. Thank you.
So, Council has convened a group of different organisations, which include Police, Port Phillip Housing Association, Star Health, Launch Housing, and some other local groups to address this matter at Little Grey Street more broadly. Council specifically is undertaking a community safety audit, and that request for people to participate was sent out this week to 470 residents in the area. So that will be happening as soon as we can make it happen. And also we're undertaking regular sweeps of the area and have increased our amenity response. There are a range of actions that the other partners have undertaken, and all of the notes from those meetings have been captured and sent out to community members. So I think that is the response that I can give without answering the direct question to Councillor Simic.
Thank you,
Can I
Mr
ask a
Lord.
question back, or?
No, you can't, Mr Lord. I'm sorry, that's a meeting procedure. I won't be asking Councillor Simic to respond either. He is... He can't answer the question because he's here as a councillor and not as a director of the PPHA board. So, yeah. Thank you, Mr Lord.
Okay, thanks very much.
Lee Meager, please.
My name is Lee Ma. I'm from Unit 9 at 151 Fitzroy Street. It's okay.
Apologies.
I get lots. It happens all the time. Thank you. My question is to all of the councillors, but particularly to you, Madam Mayor. Sorry, I've had a feeling, so I can't speak properly either. The Council of Port Phillip has spent a lot of time and money in attempting to clean up Fitzroy Street. Thank you for your efforts so far. The actions of the council have moved the issues that drove the council to clean up Fitzroy Street in the first place, which is antisocial and criminal activity, into surrounding back areas of St Kilda. My question is, what did the council think would happen with these actions, and what planning was done by council to manage the foreseeable relocation of the antisocial and criminal activity that's resided in Fitzroy Street?
Thank you. Ms Jeffs, if I can ask you to respond, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, in all of the planning for Fitzroy Street, and including the CCTV trial for Fitzroy Street, the surrounding streets were considered, and that particular evaluation of the CCTV in Fitzroy Street will pick up on aspects of impacts on surrounding streets. So, I don't think there was a hypothesis that the activity would move away from Fitzroy Street, but it's certainly something that we're aware of and will be monitoring and evaluating and bringing back to council very soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms Jeffs. You might also, the community safety audit, might want to elaborate on that as well. That's going to occur.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The community safety audit is an inclusive community engagement exercise. So it's less about establishing what's going on, but also asking people to help us determine what would help as well. So the process with that is that we've asked for people to voluntarily participate, and there will be a number of different methods to engage with people about what's going on in that particular area and come up with some recommendations and solutions to council.
Sorry, Mr Lord, you cannot speak without being in the chair there, and so you've had your go. Thank you very much. Mr Darren Robinson, please.
Darren Robinson, 13 Dalgety Street, St Kilda. My question is to Madam Mayor, Councillor Bond, Councillor Brand and Councillor Copsey. The residents of St Kilda Hill have formed an association to advocate peace and safety in our community. A group is called the Friends of St Kilda Hill and is currently representing over 50 residents of the area. The residents live in an area bordered by Fitzroy Street, Princess Street, Burnett Street and Jackson Street. We've communicated our concerns to the following members of Council: Bernadette Voss, Andrew Bond, David Brand and Katherine Copsey. The Friends of St Kilda Hill are using a Google Sheet to record incidents that negatively impact upon the safety and peace in our community. I don't know if there's an opportunity to submit that sheet, but we've shared that sheet with a number of agencies. One of the things we've done is that we've met on numerous occasions with the council and people that Carol mentioned earlier on. And in terms of the impact of the actions which are currently being taken, we're seeing a sharp increase in negative activity within the area. So my question is, what actions have you undertaken either as a council or as an individual to investigate our concerns, and what commitment can you make to the residents that our area will be effectively addressed, you'll effectively address this disruption? And the question is directed to everybody who we've informed.
Thank you, Mr Robinson. I'll just say from my perspective, first of all, and it is an issue that I have discussed with the councillors, and I have to say that the councillors are all very concerned with what's happening around there. I've had assurances from the CEO that everything is being done within what council's responsibilities are to look at and address the issue. Also, on top of that, I'll be requesting a meeting with the Chair and the CEO of PPHA as well. Ms Jeffs, is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
No, I think that just that the agencies that have come together have been working very well and productively together and collectively doing everything that we can. So I think Council has limits to its remit, but we're taking a facilitative role to try to bring everybody together to get a sustainable outcome here and not just some quick fixes.
Okay, just in terms of the document that we've captured, we've asked the agencies to use that as a benchmark to look at the actions which they're planning to take and asking whether or not those actions will address the incidents which are recorded in the document. Has this been discussed?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I can't say if it's been discussed, but we'd be very happy to take that incident report and include it as part of our audit and response approach.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr Robertson. I have to also say that complaints about criminal activity is definitely best handled by the police. That's in their remit.
Yeah, no, they've been reported to the police.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Jenny Roper, please.
Jenny Roper, Dalgety Street, St Kilda. Madam Mayor, I note that the Council is installing CCTV down on the foreshore on the back of 2 high-profile incidents occurring over the past 2 months. What steps are required for the Port Phillip Council to install CCTV cameras in Grey Street, Little Grey and Dalgety Streets? That's my question.
Ms Roper, just to be clear, Council is not installing CCTV down near the foreshore. There was a grant announced. That doesn't mean that Council is installing that, just to be clear. But I'll ask Ms Jeffs if you could elaborate on that.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I would suggest that the Council would best consider this request at the time when the Fitzroy Street evaluation comes back to the Council, so that there can be a considered policy approach to it, and that's not too far away.
Can you tell me, that's like a piece of string, how close? When?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it's within the next 2 months.
Thank you, Ms Jeffs. Thank you, Ms Roper. Amanda Ross, please. Miss Amanda Ross.
Good evening, my name's Amanda Ross. I'm from Middle Park. Madam Mayor and Councillors, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I have a petition to present to Council, and I'll just give you a brief detail of what the petition's about. The petition of the following named citizens draws the attention of the councillors to its meeting of the 15th of November last, where a majority of councillors approved a plan that states we plan to remove the physical collection of books from Middle Park Library. Over the years, the number of books, hours of opening, numbers of staff and associated resources at Middle Park have been reduced to the detriment of the municipality as a whole and the users of Middle Park Library in particular. This petition's been compiled by Middle Park residents who've been knocking on neighbours' doors, talking to neighbours on their way to the shops, having a word with them as they take their children to school, chatting with them on their way to the library. Time after time, Middle Park residents have replied they mustn't take the books away. I used to go there as a kid. Now my kids love going there to get some books. I love walking there with my grandson to choose some books. It's a real outing. You don't know when it's open or closed. And trouble is, these councillors don't live around here, not like Frank Cream. He'd come in for a cuppa. Sorry. The people of Middle Park, St Kilda, Western Albert Park don't know who you are and don't think you have any idea of what's important to them in their library. That's why the following 959 petitioners hereby request that the Council rescind the decision to remove the books from Middle Park Library and restore Middle Park Library as a fully operating library with lending books for children and adults as its core purpose.
Thank you, Ms Ross. Please hand that to Mr Chick. Councillors, I need a motion to accept that petition. Do I have a mover? Councillor Gross to move and Councillor Copsey to second. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much. We'll accept that petition and we'll come back probably in a week or our next council meeting with what we're going to do with the petition. Mr Ian Angus, please. Welcome, Mr Angus.
Thank you. Is that on now? Ian Angus, Nimmo Street, Middle Park. Thank you for the opportunity to address Council again. My issue is relating to Middle Park Library, and I just remind councillors, about 60 years ago, an Australian country and western singer wrote a song about a pub with no beer. I want to just ask Council to reflect tonight on what it is proposing with a library with no books. And while it's in whimsical form, I would ask Council to reflect that the 950 plus signatories to the petition that you've received are deadly earnest about wanting the books kept in our library. It's lonesome here in Middle Park. No books to read, the library's dark. The blinds are down, the front door locked. It's out of hours, with access blocked. The library staff all come and go. Opening hours are hard to know. When Council got a mad new notion, which they carried as a formal motion, let's toss the books and change the joint and make a high-tech meeting point, because graphic artists need some room to play with stuff, we must presume, they can't afford to buy themselves unless it's free and on the shelves. But what about the rest of us? Well, ride your bike or catch the bus to Emerald Hill or Albert Park. You might get home before it's dark. It's like Gilbert without Sullivan or a hen house with no chooks. So why is Council giving us a library with no books?
Thank you, Mr. Angus. Very clever. Next time you've got to sing it.
No questions?
Mr. Woollett, please. Welcome, Mr. Woollett.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, my questions refer to the public meeting about the removal of books from Middle Park Library held at Port Melbourne Town Hall on the 13th of February. At that meeting, an A3 piece of paper was given to the people as they came in. It is called the Port Phillip Library Service Summary Table. I am presuming this was the information on which the councillors based their decision to remove the books from the library. On one side of the A3 sheet are some dramatic charts. The trouble is they're misleading because they do not compare like with like. The Middle Park Library is open half the hours of Albert Park Library and has no story time activities to swell the numbers. The Middle Park Library has been closed because of flood damage, repairs and shortage of staff. This is not mentioned in the summary table. Does the library service keep a record of the number of days the Middle Park Library has been forced to close? How many days in the last 10 years has the Middle Park Library been forced to close due to repairs, flood damage, etc.? How many days in the last 10 years has the Middle Park Library been forced to close due to shortage of staff at other libraries? My second question is about the community consultation and submission analysis process. In previous years, this has been carried out by council staff and public meetings have been facilitated by the then Mayor. At a time when councils in Victoria are under tight budgetary constraints, why was it considered necessary to hire an external community consultation consultant? Why was a Brisbane-based consultant with no office in Melbourne chosen to handle this project for a little library in Middle Park? Did the council look at any of the large number of Melbourne-based community engagement consultants? When the total budget for this project is $47,000, including communications, isn't it profligate use of ratepayers' money to be providing return flights and accommodation for a Brisbane-based consultant, her 2 assistants, for a 2-hour public meeting about a little library in Middle Park? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Woollett. Ms. Jeffs, I think some of the numbers back to 10 years, I'm not sure you have on the top of your head, but if you see what you can do to answer those.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll take the question on notice about the record of closed days and hours. We can provide that, but I don't have them off the top of my head. And similarly, with the consultant procurement, we can provide some information about the process that we went through for that. I just would like to note that following the handout, the notes from the meeting did include an update which was requested at the meeting. That was a calculation of the visits per day that the library's open, which was something that was requested on the night. So the notes that were sent out actually did update that information, which I know doesn't exactly answer Mr. Woolett's question, but I just wanted to clarify that.
So we'll take the rest on notice and that'll be provided in the minutes, Mr Willett.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Michael Sabata, please.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. Michael Sabata, resident of South Melbourne. My questions pertain to the issue of the Middle Park Library and its future. At the public meeting on the 13th of February this year on Middle Park Library and the refocus, visitor numbers were used as the basis for various statistics and comparisons. Did the councillors use these same statistics as their starting point for the repurposing of Middle Park Library? I have 6 questions, so I don't know, shall I run through them all, or? The second question, I wish I had known it before I had made my formal submission, because, and I'd like to know, are the councillors aware that the automatic counter used to count visitor numbers located in the Middle Park Library, that it doesn't work? My third question is, are they aware that that counter apparently has not functioned for years? Fourthly, does the council know when that counter at Middle Park actually ceased to reliably function? You might find, I'm going to editorialize here, I don't expect a response to it, that it might correlate to a certain downturn in the numbers about 4 years ago. Question 5, are councillors aware that the counts are manually performed at Middle Park Library, which has a single staff person who, amongst their many other tasks, and therefore, unlike any of the other branches, Middle Park visitor count is a different and likely significantly lower count than if an automatic counter was used? And my 6th question is, when is the City of Port Phillip Council prepared to install a functioning door counter there? And again, I'll editorialize. It is a simple task. The unit that's installed at the Emerald Hill Library seems to function quite well and reliably. Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr Sabata. I have a follow-up question to you, if I may. How do you know this information? How did you gather this intelligence?
Well, one thing is I visited the library 2 Saturdays ago and noticed the door counter didn't work. It has a switch on it. You can see it at the back. I work as an engineer, by the way, so it's a very crude, wouldn't have been my choice for that sort of task, and you'll see at your other installations with door counters that they're actually a bit more fit for purpose. I went back, saw that it didn't work again, then spoke to someone who was a former employee, and then spoke to some of your other employees, and they all said, no, that thing hasn't worked for years. But not all the staff apparently know, because those who work there once or twice a year, not necessarily au fait that they need to get a scrap of paper out and tick.
Thank you, Mr Sabata. I think I can answer a couple of those questions directly on behalf of all the councillors, but no, we didn't know that the counter possibly doesn't work or it hasn't functioned for years. So that's not been in any of our reports. Ms Jeffs, is there anything else that you wanted to answer there?
No, Madam Mayor, I'll be following up those questions, and so I'll take them on notice and provide an answer in the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr Isaac Herman, please.
Isaac Herman from Elwood. Good evening, Madam Mayor, CEO, councillors, council officers. Just a few questions.
Can you speak up, Mr Herman, please?
Okay. How's this? Better? No. Is that better? Yep, thank you. Good. I'd like to ask, what has happened to the council's induction process for new councillors and staff to assist with the familiarity of the city's repositories of knowledge, her assets, infrastructure and services? How many of you have been to the Emerald Hill Local Heritage Centre or Arts and Heritage at Port Melbourne? Do you know that we have Sweetwater Springs? Do you know how many piers and jetties we have lost, other than Brooks Jetty? Sadly, we also have other local treasures that are being lost, Based on years of research and community consultation, Eld Canal master plan and management plans also seem to be buried, lost and thoroughly ignored. Will Council now review these two documents? Will Council put a stay on its toxic paving plans for Tide Street, Elwood, while it decides whether to review these essential documents? Wouldn't using our own bluestone be a cleaner, greener and cooler option? Briefly, I would also ask, what is the state of the new flood management plan and the two community consultations that were proposed for November last year? Why does Council intend on disposing of St Kilda's spring and stormwater into Albert Park when it could be used locally? The native fish that swim in the main drain underneath this building don't have an issue with the water quality. I'd like to ask also, who in Council will ensure that Bayside's Oval 2 upgrade at Elstonwick Park includes a St Kilda Street berm, bank or flood barrier before Bayside goes ahead with their Oval 2 upgrade, and we'll lose the opportunity of increasing the flood retarding basin by 10%. Lastly, I'd like to know what's the state of the city's soil contamination policy or plan. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Right, thank you, Mr Herman. There's quite a number there. Take them all on notice. Is anyone can answer any of them? I know, Mr Herman, if you wanted to send them through in future so that we can have the answers ready for you, otherwise they'd be taken on notice, but some of them are able to be handled by who we've got here.
Madam Mayor, I've raised these with council officers previously and councillors, so...
Okay, thank you, Ms Ferris-Miles.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, we will respond in detail in terms of all those questions to be included in the minutes of the meeting tonight, but I can just make a comment in regard to I attended the most recent working group meeting of the Elster Creek catchment last week, and on that agenda we did have a presentation from Melbourne Water about their strategies for updates to the flood management plan. And so that was discussed in terms of how the flood management plan, not only just for the City of Port Phillip, but could be looked at more as a catchment approach for Elster Creek, as well as looking at the wider municipality, and a discussion about how those two, that strategy update could be incorporated into the Elster Creek action plan. So that's to be discussed across all the councils. In regard to Elstonwick Park, there was the director from the City of Bayside there, and he did indicate that opportunities for flood retention as part of the upgrade of Oval 2 has not been excluded from their scope, and they are currently exploring that as an opportunity, but I can't provide, that's still in development at this stage.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Blair. I think you have an answer.
Sorry, through you, Madam Mayor, just in relation to the last question around the soil management policy. We're in the process of engaging consultants, and that piece of work will be finished by December this year.
Thank you very much. Ms Miriam Alwyn, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and councillors. As a resident and a barrister, my question...
could you please, suburb, please?
Oh, St Kilda East relates to both positions and or employments at the Port Phillip Shire. What I would like to know is whether a document such as a binding statement of good faith or its equivalent is signed by the potential employee or representative, in which the person working for or representing the council undertakes personally to abide by all the council laws, bylaws, Australian and Victorian law. And any breach of these principles would therefore have consequences which would possibly range from perhaps something like a warning, and in the most severe thing would be dismissal. The reason for this question is the last time I spoke to the council, a representative of the council made submissions which were quite contrary to the documents I had provided. I'm not sure whether we're allowed to use the more common vernacular of this term, but simply as a barrister, if I was to provide a court or a tribunal with a submission or my word which was contrary or contradictory to the documents in question, my fate would be I'd be struck off. As a barrister, this would be very harsh. I'm not suggesting that if there's an error, someone would necessarily get the sack, but surely in this 21st century, when we are now seeing a rise in all sorts of behaviour which were possibly quite unfamiliar in the past, I think that it would be reassuring to me that, or probably everyone, that councillors and representatives would need to make, like I know when I went to America, in America we had to sign this kind of document, like we wouldn't bring guns to school. I mean, that's America, okay. We don't bring
so your question is, do we have some sort of code of conduct that outlines, you know, what...
Yeah, so that if the person breaches, like say, I mean, in a hypothetical situation, if they were caught stealing another person's purse, that there would be consequences.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll.
Through you, Madam Mayor. We do have a code of conduct that staff need to adhere to, and there are disciplinary procedures where they don't conduct themselves in accordance with that. But beyond that, there's general expectations of people in the public sector around behaving with integrity and with good ethics. We have a range of requirements around different processes and procedures, including signing off on conflict of interest, for instance, and participating in recruitment processes or procurement processes. And generally, particularly if it's in a general kind of law setting, acting with integrity and faith. So without necessarily all of those things being documented in a code of conduct, there are a range of requirements and expectations and disciplinary procedures that are held against staff for not acting in accordance with those. Beyond that, there's also independent third parties who review officer conduct when it comes to things like fraud and corruption, and also another avenue for holding staff to account.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll. Thank you, Ms. Orwin.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask Ms. Jennifer Edge, please. Welcome, Ms. Edge.
Thank you.
You might have to put the microphone a little closer to you.
I'm trying to get the chair.
Yeah, it's a bit hard on the carpet. Just...
Right. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the Yalukit Willem of the Bunurong language group, who are the traditional custodians of the land and never ceded sovereignty. I'm here as a direct request of Arweet Carolyn Briggs under sufferance. I refer to item 13 on the agenda with nothing beside it, namely arts, culture and economic development. And underneath it's got written, we thrive by harnessing creativity. Based on that, I also refer you to A, comments by Kieran Rooney of the Herald Sun in December 17. B, comments both in person and in print from residents, namely Deborah Holland and Magda Majewski or something, Matt Vijjev. Over time, Katherine Copsey, Lake Ward Councillor, nice to meet you. Tim Baxter, Canal Ward, we're known to one another. And also Joe Amayo in The Age on Thursday the 8th of February. All of those
Edge,
people...
can you come to your question,
I
please?
am. All of those people have made what appear to be disparaging comments in regards to a long-term, spontaneous cultural group performing in the city of St Kilda for over 20 years. That group has a Facebook page, St Kilda Drumming, and I asked for COP's support to redress these errors by providing clear signage for the drumming site in the Rotary Children's Park, restoring the lighting in the Rotary Children's Park, restoring the safety barriers against the footpath from the Rotary Children's Park to the Jacka Boulevard pedestrian path, and I ask that this be looked at urgently, as the former Deputy Mayor, one of the drummers and I met, and I followed up with the former Deputy Mayor of the previous council about these lights and matters of safety. I understand you're looking at community safety being restored 18 months or more ago. So with the refurbishment of the Stoke House, one of those lights was removed. It knocked out the other 3. The safety pedestrian barriers were removed so that trucks could enter. The children's play equipment was also removed. And it's beholding on us all to put that equipment back so that the children can use it. But my main concern here is in adherence to a request from Audit Carolyn Briggs about problems that have been attributed to a spontaneous performing group that's been going for 20 years in the city of St Kilda, who have not been responsible for some of the alleged bad behaviour and violence along the foreshore over a period of time, despite what the aforementioned authors, journalists and others may have said.
I understand.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so there's probably a couple elements to this, the drumming community, but also the Rotary Park and its restoration. Mr Carroll?
Through you, Madam Mayor, in terms of the Rotary Children's Park, that's there is a requirement for the Stoke House to reinstate that park. We're now working with them closely, including I've got a meeting with the Chief Executive and Frank Van Handel from the Stoke House on Friday to discuss the timetable for reinstatement, and we're looking to get that done as soon as possible.
Mr Carroll, does that include the lights? I know it includes the playground, but what about the lights? Excuse me, you just need to, you've had your go?
I'll have to check. That's additional information I wasn't aware of in regards to the lighting and the safety barriers, but I will check that as part of this process.
Thank you very much. And is there any feedback on the drumming? We'll take that on notice.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I need to take that on notice.
Thank you, Ms Blair. So you'll get that, that'll be in the minutes of the meeting, a response to the drumming component of your question. Thank you, Ms Edge. Mr Brandon Lowe, I think it is. Welcome, Mr Lowe.
I acknowledge the land custodian. My name is
Might need to speak up. We're having trouble hearing tonight.
My name is Brandon Lowe from Ann Street, Brunswick.
Mr Chick, if you would take those flyers. I think there's 2 there. There's another one there too, please. Sorry to interrupt you, Mr Lowe. If you... Miss Edge, please do not speak unless you have the chair. I'd appreciate that. Mr Lowe.
For 20 years I've been drumming in St Kilda. Started with 2 of us. This has grown spontaneously since and formed into the St Kilda drumming on Facebook. This is what you see today. Can we have a clear signage similar to that erected by the Byron Shire to be located at the Rotary Children's Park on Jacka Boulevard with clear finishing time, please? Thank you.
So, Mr Lowe, we get a lot of complaints about the drumming going well into the early mornings. What is the finishing time that you are thinking about?
Personally, 10:30.
Thank you, Mr Lowe.
Thank you.
PM.
PM. Sorry, PM. Thank you.
Will we take that on notice, Ms Blair? Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr Lowe. And I think that's it for the public question time. So we'll move into councillor question time.
Madam Mayor, if I can interrupt for a moment. Is there any way we can correct the record on those statements attributed to myself and Katherine Copsey?
Mr Baxter, Councillor Baxter, I don't know that we can because we don't know what the allegations are. They could have been positive. So, thank you, Councillor Baxter. We'll move to councillor question time. Councillors, do you have any questions? Councillor Bond.
Yeah, as was raised earlier tonight, for last Tuesday's meeting regarding Middle Park Library held at the Port Melbourne Town Hall, did we fly our consultants and their assistants down from Brisbane? And if so, what was the cost involved in hiring those consultants for the evening?
Ms Jeffs, I think it was a
Through you, Madam Mayor. One of the consultants was from Brisbane. I don't have the exact costs with me, so I'll take that on notice and provide it.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. To follow up?
Did we pay for flights and accommodation for that person?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'll take that on notice as well.
Thank you, Ms Jeffs. Councillor Crawford.
Unfortunately, I was not able to attend as I work on a Tuesday night to the last week's meeting, but I do have a few follow-up questions on the Middle Park Library, if I may. So in terms of the hours lessening over a period of time, and I'm not sure that we ever had, given the size of the library, did we ever have another staff member? But were the reduced hours a reflection of the dwindling numbers, not just in the recent years, but previous years before it? I'd just like to clarify that. And when I visited the library myself recently, I was of the understanding, I did not know that we had automatic library checkers in any of our libraries, and the librarian on duty was recording the numbers as I could see that, and from the conversation I had with that person, it seemed like it was a regular occurrence. So could I clarify that we have been recording numbers, not through the automatic system, but through using our librarians, and that the reduction in hours was a result of the long-term decline in borrowing of books at the library, please?
Thank you, Councillor Copsey. I think some of those was being taken on notice, but there might be some of them that you can answer, Ms Jeffs.
Through you, Madam Mayor, certainly the recording of numbers manually, I'll take that on notice because it's related to a question from earlier. In terms of has the reduced hours been caused, what's the causal effect between the numbers of borrowings, visitors and the hours that are open? I also take that on notice, but just the comment that the library service overall is managed as a whole service, and there have been decisions made over the years about where to allocate resources across the whole service. So in terms of a direct cause between the numbers, the borrowings and the hours, I would say that that's not as direct as that.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Pearl?
Thanks. Just quickly, one that just came on before, there was a petition presented to council for heavy vehicle parking by Mr Cresp some weeks ago. When's that coming back? When's the response coming back to council on that petition?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we're currently working through that and we anticipate that coming back to council in approximately a month.
Councillor Pearl.
And just a separate question, just wondering if the officers can update us on any EPA operations relating to noise pollution, particularly in Port Melbourne, have been conducted over the summer and what the results were.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'll need to take that on notice.
I could possibly answer that, Councillor Pearl. There's been 2 in conjunction with the police carried out in Port Melbourne. Unfortunately, the EPA didn't really carry them out at the right time, i.e. when it's hot weather and after 10 p.m. So there was minimal results, if you like. But they are learning from that experience. Councillor Crawford.
I guess mine is wanting to just clarify on the record around the Little Grey Street issues, that we as a council, are there any other areas within our remit that we actually can affect? It is a complicated and problem that's obviously not going to be resolved overnight, and we are concerned for the safety of our residents. But I just wanted to check that there are no other areas that we can do within our capacity, and that it is more probably in the hands of the state government or in the PVHA and the police in terms of the safety element.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I believe that we are doing everything within our powers that's within Council's remit. However, the community safety audit will generate ideas and it's important that that is done with the local community, and that Council just doesn't come up with solutions that may not hit the mark. So there are likely to be more suggestions coming forward.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. Anybody else? No more questions? Okay, so then we'll move now to item 8, which is presentation of CEO report, but we don't have any, so we'll jump to 12, which is our reports. So 12.1 is the Council submission on the Albert Park Draft Master Plan. And we have one person that's requested to speak, Hugo Armstrong. Welcome, Mr Armstrong. If you could please take a seat and pop on the microphone, state your name and suburb.
Thanks very much, Madam Mayor. My name's Hugo Armstrong. I live in Port Melbourne, and I am the immediate past president and an ongoing committee member of the South Melbourne District Sports Club, which is the largest community-based sports club in Albert Park, with about 1,500 participants, from very small to very big, including the children of various councillors in cricket, athletics and Australian rules. I have also made it my business to engage with many of the other 20-odd community sports clubs in Albert Park to encourage them to participate in that master plan program, and they have done so. Many of them have made their own submissions, but we've also tried to get them all together into a room and get some general agreement, and I think that generally has happened. The sports clubs generally support the master plan, if only because after 20 years and a very old and tired master plan, we're in a new world, a new realm, and that park desperately needs some overall guidance, and I'm sure Council would agree with that, knowing just how critically important that resource is for this municipality and its people. That said, I'd like to make just a few very quick comments in relation to the draft submission, which the Council is planning to put in. I'm very pleased that Council is doing that, and a big point is that we're very much keen to have Council represent its ratepayers and actively engage with that process. Just very quickly, 3 or 4 points to summarise that. Some of you may have had a chance to read it. I won't the page or so that we put in. The most important thing about, from the point of view of the community sports clubs and the residents who play their sport there, is the growing demand for participation. A, driven by population, B, more recently by the very welcome wave of female participation in a number of sports, but certainly in AFL as well, although I hasten to say it's not purely an AFL phenomenon at all. The most critical issue for us is that the urgent need for further investment to increase and maintain the sustainable carrying capacity of the park for community sporting activities. And if you Council were to do one thing, it would be to include that concept in your submission. I recognise that the draft master plan is a strategy document, not a funding document, but every opportunity must be taken to get to the core of the issues and to make the appropriate authorities at the moment, Parks Victoria and the state government, understand that if we're going to meet the needs of the residents of the city of Port Phillip, very quickly indeed, we need to improve the quality of the grounds and the facilities there so that the clubs can continue to meet that demand. It's very, very tight already at the moment. There are clubs who turn people away, and that will only increase with all the detrimental values that come out of that. So I specifically requested under both the sport and recreation section and the resilience and sustainability section of the submission that principle be acknowledged. A couple of other points very quickly. The view of the sporting clubs is that the golf course is the most underutilised part of the park. That view is significantly anecdotal. It's certainly true. We have seen, obviously, the announcement that's made this week by Parks Victoria that the 18-hole course will be retained. While I'm very happy to debate that viewpoint because there is a fair bit of evidence to suggest otherwise, but the one thing that I would urge Council to do is to encourage Parks to press ahead with the proposal to have the driving range moved across and consolidated so that there is a single golfing precinct of however many holes and under whatever configuration to allow the land that's currently used for a driving range to be able to be utilised for extra sporting grounds and potentially some passive recreation too. There is room there to do both those things. That's what's in the draft master plan that really needs to be supported. The last little point very quickly is about the cycling criterium course, I understand why Council would strongly support moving that from the South Melbourne thing down near the Council depot into the park, but it doesn't acknowledge, and I think the submission should acknowledge, that there are community sporting clubs, including my own, that use that on Sunday mornings in summer when the cycling criterium would be expected to be there, and we need to find a way to at least to coexist. That's not identified at the moment. So that's in relation to that submission. Madam Mayor, if I might make one further broader observation, it is that our clubs feel very keenly the need for a consolidated and enhanced and more active relationship between the City of Port Phillip and Parks Victoria in the overall management of Albert Park. That needs to take two strands, and neither of them is without their challenges. One is in engagement and representation. We feel, as ratepayers who are in the park, that the council really doesn't engage in any substantive way, which is not to say that many of the councillors are not sympathetic to those views, but quite frankly, we pay our rates, but simply because we play sport in a certain area, we get next to no support compared to those who are lucky enough to happen to play their sport at Peanut Farm or Murphy's Reserve or the like. There's an fundamental imbalance there. I'm not telling you that we have the answers, but we do beseech Council to deal with that, and a corollary of that is funding contribution as well. There are challenges there, but you can't simply walk away from it and say, no, that's the state government's, we're going to continue to freeload on Parks Victoria and the state government. Council, one way or another, needs to do what its own sport and recreation strategy says, get a memorandum of understanding and engage more on behalf of the community sports clubs.
Thank you very much for coming in, Mr Armstrong. Yes, you may, Councillor Brand, to Mr Armstrong.
Mr Armstrong, you asked that we please include the concept of your first point in Council's submission, presuming it's absent from there. Can you just clarify what the key points of that concept is? Is that an active versus passive? It's about funding?
The key point is that relatively absent from the master plan and certainly absent from the submission is a recognition that the most critical issue facing Albert Park is increasing demand for limited resources, and that in order to allow to improve the ability for the community to use the park for a whole range of things on a sustainable basis, that there needs to be a recognition and a recognition in principle that funding, and not insignificant amount, not as much as a Grand Prix might cost each year, but a still not insignificant amount, needs to be invested in the park to allow more City of Port Phillip residents and ratepayers to continue to play and to allow the park to service them on a sustainable basis. That's probably not quite as succinct as you might have asked for, Councillor. I apologise for that.
Thank you.
But increasing and maintaining the sustainable carrying capacity of the park. That's the key phrase.
Yep.
And the funding that's required to do that.
Councillor Gross, you also had a question for Mr Armstrong.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Mr Armstrong, what time does play kick off in summer and winter on Sunday mornings in the park with your teams?
I can only speak for our junior cricketers. I can't speak for the soccer players and some of the other sports, Councillor, but we play from about 8:30 to about 11:30 or 12. We're limited by the fact that there's only 2 ovals in the park with concrete surfaces, not turf wickets. Juniors don't play on turf wickets for obvious reasons. But it is most Sunday mornings, and our demand for cricket is certainly increasing at that level, both female amongst girls as well, and boys as well.
Thank you, Mr Armstrong. Councillors, if you could take a seat. Do you have any questions of the officers? Councillor Pearl.
Quick question regarding community engagement in terms of our submission. It's not our role to run community engagement on behalf of Parks Victoria on their master plan, obviously, but what community engagement did you undertake to inform this submission? I note from Fisherman's Bend, for example, albeit there's some existing infrastructure there regarding forums, etc., but there was a large amount of community input that was put into our submission to Fisherman's Bend. Did a similar thing happen with our submission to this report?
Thank you, Mr Trail.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the first thing I'd like to note is the timing of when this master plan was out. It was through the December Christmas New Year period, which is a busy time, and where winter clubs are not operating and summers do go through a mini recess. We did have input into designing up the community consultation with Parks Victoria and some of the expectations that we had, which included having an online survey, information forums with the sporting clubs directly, drop-in session at the South Melbourne Market, drop-in session at Reserve. So using some of the principles that we do when we want to engage about important topics is how we sort of gave feedback on what Parks Victoria should do during that time. Officers did make a submission in that timeline. Through that, we do engage with a lot of clubs and through normal practice. There wasn't any direct engagement from us with residents or sports clubs, as it was a Parks Victoria. We did encourage all those people to submit formally to the process.
Thank you. Councillor Copsey.
Thank you. I know we have, I don't know if I should foreshadow, but it's an alternative recommendation that officers have prepared given the developments around the master plan in the last week. And I just note, in the original submission that was circulated in our draft, in our report, under the golf course precinct heading, we stated, officers' submission stated that Parks Victoria has proposed to reduce the size of the existing golf course and move the existing drive range to be co-located within the golf course precinct. And I wonder if there's nothing inconsistent with the alternate recommendation that's coming and still supporting consideration of consolidation of the driving range into a golf course precinct. That's what I wanted to clarify. Would that still fit with the officer's alternate recommendation?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it is correct our position prior to the determination from Parks Victoria about the golf course was we wanted to get that balance between increased space and supporting community with a variety of active spaces. The determination requires us to understand the impacts of that a bit further. So some high-level things to consider is that is the side of the park that connects in with a domain precinct. We're expecting high growth. So we want to know how that sort of connects into that area. We'd want to know what their plans are with the driving range, how they may still look to either do that or not do that, what the impacts to the sports clubs and the other proposals through that area, and what other impacts that may have to cycling routes or plans through that area. This is not uncommon through a master plan that you work on these elements and develop them based around the community feedback, and that's something that we will do as officers, work with Parks Victoria, noting that that determination for Parks Victoria was only 3 days ago.
I've also got a question. I can't see any other hands up. So just wanted to understand what programming Council does with Parks Victoria, if any, and how is it programmed? And especially, I know that we do some around Grand Prix time, because we have to accommodate, the displaced sporting clubs to our own grounds. So just wondering, is any opportunity to, as Mr. Armstrong's mentioned, to further improve our communication and what we do and how we do it with Parks Victoria?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'd like to highlight I think we have a very good relationship with Parks Victoria, which helps our sports clubs during a difficult time for the municipality where the clubs at the Albert Park Reserve don't have access to their grounds. That is not only just for the week of the event, it does impact the lead up while they set up infrastructure. It also impacts many clubs with the deterioration of their grounds caused by a lot of people at the reserve. We play an active role in utilising our land that we manage to help support those clubs throughout that period. I'd like to highlight also a similar challenge that Parks Victoria have, and in keeping with Mr Armstrong's presentation about the importance of increasing load capacity of our grounds, which is a challenge before us as council with the land that we manage, where we've got the development of Fisherman's Bend and the current demand of our space with land we manage is significant and a challenge for us at the moment. Council's invested significantly in this space with pavilions and ground upgrades to just keep up with that demand, and we've got further challenges ahead of us with the growth that we are predicting. So things that we are looking at, and Parks Victoria are looking at very similar strategies, are different types of services, access to water, synthetic services, lighting to get more access on the ground. Unfortunately, grounds only get approximately 20 hours of active use a week before they start to deteriorate to a condition where they can't be used. So alternate programming and new ways of providing for sport is required for this precinct, which we are looking at with our neighbouring councils about how we can help each other with service needs, but also facilities to plan smarter.
Councillor Gross.
Mr Trail, I've got two questions, and I want some advice about whether they're too low order for this high order master plan document. The first is the conflict between aspirations of various groups on the Fitzroy Street end. I note that there's a question about whether native grasses are appropriate, and also other people in the community have aspirations to reintroduce the European trees that once populated that end of the park down the south. So in order to accommodate those two conflicting aspirations, is there something we should put in, or just leave it to later on after the master plan has been passed?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'll hand over to Ms Alcock to sort of go through those specific elements. Just to highlight, this is a 25-year vision document, and it is appropriate for Council to put in our submission things that we passionately believe in and connect into existing stuff that we're doing. And Claire Ms Alcock will answer to those two specific elements.
Through you, Madam Mayor, there are a number of initiatives in relation to the Fitzroy Street precinct which we have supported in this submission, mostly in relation to what you've commented on is the lining the Fitzroy Street with plane trees, particularly given the value that the residents along Fitzroy Street place on the green aspect of the reserve. We have requested in the submission amendments to be made to the master plan, particularly in response to the perimeter path along Fitzroy Street, to create a formal promenade supported with small meandering paths leading to the Nagari tree and revegetation areas. and we have encouraged Parks Victoria to refer to the landscape plan previously prepared but not implemented by Taylor, Coletti, Leafland for the area south of Junction Oval.
Thank you. So I think the question was, is the grasses relevant to really the strategic master plan?
So in response to that question, I think further work needs to be undertaken by Parks Victoria, but I think the submission encourages that as written.
One last question. How easy would it be to resolve the potential conflict between the criterium and the use by junior cricket and footy clubs or be only cricket because it's a summer criterium season? I know this is speculation, but how easy are those conflicts able to be resolved? Potential conflicts, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Trail.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Resolving that challenge is going to require multiple solutions to that. It's going to be an infrastructure of existing spaces. It's going to be how you can access those spaces safely. It will present a challenge because it is a challenge when the time wants to be used, a very popular time for sport in that area. So alternate ideas are required. That may be different programming. It may be infrastructure of a course that limits the impact of some of those reserves. It's understanding the parking implications of that as well. But working with Parks Victoria, we've got a similar philosophy about making sure that we don't impact the clubs, and we've had that conversation with them, and they've given assurances that they want to work with the clubs and they want to not impact any clubs, deal with the current demand, but also deal with the challenges coming forward. Based around that, we think there'll be workable solutions that will require club input into that can be achieved.
And indeed, there could be nets that could stop balls going out. Councillor Brand.
I'd like to ask Mr. Trail if, just following up on Mr. Armstrong's request that we include the concept of the need for investment in further investment in the park, in principle. My feeling is that we have either said that or at least implied that in council's submission. But I'm wondering, can you take me to our best effort at expressing that sentiment that we encourage a further level of investment in the infrastructure of the park to investment in sustainable,
I think, Councillor Brand, if you read 3.2 in the alternative, the one behind that piece of paper, I think you'll see it specifically says that.
That's right. That was specifically in response to Mr. Armstrong in the first place. I retract my question. Excellent.
Sorry, Councillor Pearl.
Quick question on the cycling circuit and moving it from South Melbourne. I'm just wondering, the whole Fisherman's Bend needs a new ecosystem to build and go forward. I understand the constraints that construction must have on that existing circuit in South Melbourne. But does the club want to move to Albert Park, or is there any way we can keep it in South Melbourne to kind of keep that as a constant that's been operating in that area, albeit understand it's going to be a construction site for some time? It seems a small piece of cultural heritage that's unique to South Melbourne that might be able to be carried forward if we could possibly keep it there.
I'll get Mr. Nankervis to go through some of those elements. Just highlight that the club has been successfully running an event within that precinct in South Melbourne. The development of Fisherman's Bend is well publicised, and the changing nature of that area. There's the amenity impacts of now compared to what they are developing into in the future is changing, and I'll let David go through some of where we're at with conversation with the St Kilda Cycling Club.
Through you, Madam Mayor. The cycling club certainly has a strong history in the South Melbourne area. They have submitted a proposal into their feedback for the master plan, expressing their desire to locate into the Albert Park Reserve area, as indicated on the draft master plan. With the increased development in Fisherman's Bend, as Mr Trail alluded to, the increased construction activity, increased residents, pedestrians and associated traffic, Council's still unsure of what the future holds in that site. So we're supportive of Parks Victoria in general proposing that circuit criterion in the reserve, but certainly not to the detriment of the existing clubs and making sure those clubs are consulted. So the Cycling Club has submitted an application to continue to use the current site at South Melbourne for next season, which is next summer season, which we're currently reviewing that proposal at this stage.
Thank you, Mr Nankervis. Any other questions, councillors? Then we have an alternative recommendation. Maybe I'll ask Mr Trail if you could explain why we've got an alternative recommendation and just the content of it, please.
Through you, Madam Mayor, officers have proposed an alternate recommendation. The report and submission that we submit publicly was made available to our community on Thursday last week. There was developments over the weekend that officers considered that should be relevant for the debate of councillors and consideration as a resolution. We have put a submission up that we should amend our submission, so we've documented within the resolution what we believe those amendments should be and seek council and resolution regarding that, delegating to the Chief Executive Officer to make those amendments if that is what Council desires.
Thank you, Mr Trail. So we have an alternative recommendation. Do I have a mover for that or something different? Councillor Gross to move, Councillor Brand to second. Councillor Gross, would you like to speak to the motion? Do I have another seconder? Might be easier. Councillor Copsey to second. Councillor Gross, would you like to speak?
No, thank you. I'll close if there's any big issues.
Councillor Copsey.
I thank officers for their work in turning around the change to the changes that we'll be making to accommodate the late change in the draft master plan that we were going to be making our submission on. I'm broadly supportive of, I'm very supportive of the entirety of the content. Albert Park is hugely important to our municipality, though we don't control it. It provides 60% of the open space that Port Phillip residents love to use and recreate in. I'm particularly excited about the chance for the park to get revitalised. I'll just mention a couple of things that have come through, feedback from residents, which are reflected in Council's submission that we'll be putting to the master plan. It is really disappointing that, given the master plan has a 25-year focus, the opportunity wasn't taken to envisage Albert Park without the Grand Prix. The City of Port Phillip opposes the staging of the Grand Prix in Albert Park. It has a hugely detrimental impact on the grounds and the surrounds and the use of the park by those of us who enjoy it as a park for months of the year, not just during the Grand Prix, but an extensive pack up and pack down. So it is disappointing that that opportunity was missed. However, Parks Victoria is working within the bounds that have been set for it by the state government. So we'll keep plugging away to make sure that the park is used as a park and not as a motorsports facility, which is inappropriate. I'm strongly supportive of the criterium circuit being placed in the park. It's really exciting to see cycling, which is a very popular sport locally, being accommodated. I note that the circuit can also accommodate other uses, such as learn to ride and defensive riding courses, which is something that we're trying to encourage very strongly in the City of Port Phillip. It's a safe and segregated space for people to learn to cycle safely. And, of course, part of the task that lays ahead for Parks Victoria is to look at the existing uses in the park and how we can accommodate more, I hope, more passive and active recreation, do more with the park, not less. And so I wish all the participants and stakeholders who are involved, not just City of Port Phillip, very good luck and goodwill in negotiating that space. It is a space that we all use and love, and I'm very confident that we can come to mutually beneficial outcomes for our residents and current users of the park. So thank you, Mr Armstrong, for coming and presenting tonight. I think your comments are reflected in the submission, and I'm sure that we can come to a solution that accommodates some of the new ideas along with what we've been using the park for years. I think
Thank you,
that's
Councillor Copsey. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Brand, you would like to move an amendment? Yes, you may. Can you just pop on your microphone, please?
I would like to move an amendment to the current proposed alternative recommendation there, and that would be to add at 3.1, continuing on from there. I'll read the second half of it, I think. It strongly supports opportunities to increase both passive and active recreation within the Albert Park Reserve, and to increase pedestrian access to and through the park from the Queen's Road residential area. To increase pedestrian access to and through the park from the Queen's Road residential area.
Thank you, Councillor Brand. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Baxter? Councillor Brand, please speak to your motion.
Okay. Look, I'm not particularly against the idea of an 18-hole golf course, but I think that there's quite possible that there is a strong argument that reducing the size of the golf course itself might help increase the passive and active recreation opportunities in the park for more people to use it and more different uses. And also I think the other thing is that the presence of the 18-hole golf course actually permanently prevents any pedestrian access from Queen's Road, from all those people into the park. And so I think that we need to acknowledge that they're intending to keep the golf course as it is, but since we're saying, but notwithstanding this, we confirm a strong support for increasing the number of uses and people in the park, and we also support the opportunities to increase pedestrian permeability to the park from that side.
Thank you, Councillor Brand. Just pop off your microphone. Councillor Baxter, would you like to speak to that amendment? So we're only debating the bit in red on the screen, just to clarify. Would you like to speak to that?
Only to say, yeah, I agree.
Would anyone else like to speak to that amendment? Councillor Pearl?
Just a clarifying question to Councillor Brand. Specifically, we're talking about overpasses, underpasses, pedestrian crossings. Can you be a bit more specific so I can gauge whether or not to support your amendment? I'm
specifically being non-specific because we cannot say what the opportunities are. We cannot say... It's the same form as the previous clause, which is about that we support any opportunities to increase whatever they may be in the future, and I think it's fair to say that we would do the same with pedestrian access.
I'd also like to ask a clarifying question to Mr. Trail, please. Mr. Trail, I understand that's already in the report. Can you just confirm that, please?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Yep, within our submission on page 24 of the pack, I think it's trying to get a page of the submission. There's a heading where we talk about access and movement. In there we do highlight this specific point about increased pedestrian connectivity between Queen's Road. We do highlight in there that Council does not support share bridge for access across Queen's Road.
So I'm going to add a follow-up clarifying question, Mr. Trail. I guess there's not certainty at the moment, given the change to pull out if the golfing component comes out because of the announcements recently. Will that stay in? Can you confirm that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the determination around the community feedback to maintain the 18 holes golf does, like I answered earlier, require us to do more work around the master plan and some of those implications around that. And we'll need to work with community and others regarding that. So this will be one of the elements that we need to understand a lot better. And the other elements is, will the golf driving range still be on that side? What's the passive areas and event spaces that have been identified in the master plan?
One further question, Mr Trail. In your opinion, do we need this amendment specifically spelt out, or do you think it's adequately covered? Should Council decide that that's important?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we believe the submission covers this point. However, if councillors decide that they want to emphasise this, like other points in our resolution, they can do that.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Brand, would you like to close?
I just think it makes sense to, if we are actually listing the effects that the principles that we still want to uphold, even though we recognise that the plans for the golf course have changed, that we might as well list them comprehensively and openly without being, going into great detail, but just in principle.
Thank you, Councillor Brand. I will now put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. So that becomes part of the substantive motion. So where are we up to? So we've had Councillor Gross, Councillor Copsey. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Brand.
Yes, I support the motion, especially as amended. In particular, I just want to note the addition of point 3.3, which is the Isaac Jacobs Memorial Fountain being recognised. Probably needs to be recognised in the heritage list as well, actually, when I come to think of it. But it is, it's a delightful feature which has been there since, I think, about 1910, give or take a few years. It's a temperance attempt to get people to drink water rather than beer, and it's exactly the same. Yes, it's quite. We're in the same Puritan swell. It's essentially the same as the Fairchild Fountain on the Esplanade. It's been sitting behind a pair of traffic signal boxes, invisible from traffic since the junction was done in the early 70s. It's just the most terrible placement of the junction boxes that you could possibly imagine. But I think the answer is to pick up the fountain itself and place it eventually in a really well-worked out landscape right across that edge, the Fitzroy Street edge, and make it a prominent and valued part of our local heritage again.
Thank you, Councillor Brand. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Bond.
I won't be supporting the motion that's before us, primarily because I think that first point seems to suggest that we are supportive of the reduction of the golf course. It's the current position of the state government and the opposition that the golf course be maintained at 18 holes, and that decision is based on overwhelming feedback from the local community that they want to retain the 18 holes. I noticed that earlier today the government put out a statement saying that the driving range is going to be retained in its current location, so any questions over what was going to happen with that I think have been answered by that statement that came out today. I don't think our submission adequately addresses the conflict between new users and existing users. An example of that is the criterium course. Yes, it would be great to have a criterium course in Albert Park, but if that's going to come at the impact and come along and impact greatly the existing clubs that operate in that oval at the current time where the criterium course is proposed to operate, I don't think that's fair on existing users. I think we should state that we will protect the rights of the existing users and then anyone that comes along must fit in with the existing users. We appear to support in this proposal numerous at-grades crossings of Queen's Road. which with the closure of St Kilda Road is going to become an even bigger traffic sewer for Melbourne. I've asked Parks Victoria on a number of occasions, what did Vic Roads say when they discussed with them the proposal for at-grade pedestrian crossings of Queen's Road, and their response was, no, we haven't discussed it with Vic Roads as yet. I know from previous proposals where we attempted to get a footbridge across Queen's Road, a permanent footbridge across Queen's Road at one stage, that Parks Victoria would in no way contemplate an additional at-grade pedestrian crossing of Queen's Road, and we should be fully aware of that, yet our submission supports that option, which is very unlikely to occur. I also like to note Mr Armstrong's concerns with the current state of the sporting facilities. Yes, they certainly need to increase. I think there's lots of opportunities there to increase sporting facilities within the existing ovals. We've got ovals 1, 12 and 13 don't even have change rooms yet. So if we're looking for opportunities to set aside ovals for female sport, we could certainly build change rooms, female sport compliant change rooms at any one of those 3 ovals. Every oval in the park, I think, could do with an upgrade in lighting, which would allow those ovals to be used to a much greater capacity in the evening. And all of that without having to reduce the golf course. There's Oval 21 has been effectively decommissioned by the gravel pit that it becomes every March as a result of the Grand Prix. It's unplayable for any sort of sport because the amount of gravel that's within the grass. There's opportunities within this master plan that they didn't explore to relocate that oval to another position, change facilities or change functionality with another part of the oval, and we could create an extra sporting oval there. All of that without reducing, impacting current users. So I don't think our submission adequately reflects these opportunities. Therefore, I won't be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Pearl.
I'll share Councillor Bond's objection, but for very different reasons. So, just to start off with, I think this council's DNA is largely in Albert Park, and over the past few years, for whatever reason, our focus hasn't been commensurate with the important place that this park sits in our overall municipality. This submission is one part stage to amend that problem, but the council really should have been better involved, and the last council should have been better involved in the development of this master plan. It's been in the works, I think, since the previous government, so probably 2013. And I think that it got lost in the last government. It got lost in the first part of this government, and to their credit, they've come out with something, but it hasn't been really in a spirit of partnership necessarily with one of the key custodians of that area, which is us. So it's a hugely important area and a massively historic area. There's some of the oldest trees in Victoria reside in that park, public trees in any case. But the key thing that concerns me most about the way we've gone about it is the lack of consultation with the sporting groups in the adjacent community to the area in terms of our submission. Bad time of the year to do it, short window of opportunity, but we knew this master plan was being developed over time, and we should have a really strong relationship with those clubs that are effectively, most of them are our residents in our municipality, where we can call on that relationship pretty quickly to get their feedback and pull together to get to ensure that our submission is reasonably seamless, so long as it's in our interest, obviously, to do that. That might come back to bite us. I've seen the benefit of that. The Fisherman's Bend submission that we made was hugely beneficial, given the community consultation and review process we had, albeit I understand the difficulties you had. Just to go back to the point on DNA, the park's a huge advantage to our local community. There aren't too many places in the world you get 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools that we don't have to maintain and don't have to pay for, that our community get access to. We put a small contribution to, that's true. How much was it? 2.45 million, I think, in 1994? 3 million?
A crippling amount of money.
It was a lot, sorry. we don't have to pay for the maintenance of it in any case, but it was a pretty good deal, I suspect, in terms of putting some money in up front and not having to pay for the tail risk. But my favourite part of Albert Park was playing at the Wooden Adventure Playground in that area, which was built by a $50,000 grant in 1990 or thereabouts by the City of South Melbourne, and a Commonwealth grant as well. That park was built by the hands of over 150 volunteers. Yeah, there you go. These hands over here. But what it demonstrates to you is back then the park was part of the community, which it still is, but the council was integrated in the DNA. Very different time, very different governance. But I'd like to see us as a council move more to that, where we're actually in partnership with Parks Victoria and getting a great outcome. So I'm voting against this on the basis that we haven't done enough work with local residents and local community groups to inform our submission. There's a lot of it I support, though, and I thank the officers for their hard work.
Thank you, Councillor Pearl. Councillor Baxter.
I'll make my comments rather quick because of the length of other councillors' comments. Basically, I'll just say that I am quite happy with the submission that we're making here. I think that this master plan is actually a really exciting opportunity, and I spent a lot of time in Albert Park Reserve because it's actually the park basically in between my house and my parents' place, so it's quite convenient. But there's some really amazing stuff that is being looked at to happen here, and I think that there's so many more opportunities to increase people's access to walkability and cyclability and all of those things in the park to be able to just enjoy passive recreation. And I think that that's something we should absolutely be supporting. But certainly sport is a massive part of that park as well. And I'm quite happy to hear from sports users about their views on these on what we're submitting here, because they're spending a lot of time in that park.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Anybody else like to speak? Then I will also speak. Just also like to thank Mr Armstrong for engaging the councillors and for coming out tonight. Really appreciate that. My view is that we have a really critical issue with sporting grounds. They're overused, and not just at Albert Park, but our entire municipality. It certainly needs more investment, as Mr Armstrong has said, more investment to maintain and increase the carrying capacity so our whole community can keep active and outside. I'd like to encourage the officers, while it's not specifically in the resolution here, to continue the thinking around how we can strengthen our relationship and our influence with Parks Victoria, whether it is under an MOU or whatever. We certainly have a growing population, and as we've seen here, Albert Park has more than half the green and sporting space for our community. And while we're not the responsible authority, we are, I would argue, the biggest stakeholder. Our community is. We need to be strong and firm about our expectations and reflect that of our community. My observation is that a better and more sophisticated lens needs to be put into this critical issue. I personally think the golf course is underutilised, especially by our immediate community, and I did think that the relocation of the driving range made excellent sense. I'm very supportive in the submission of the lighting being a significant issue and that being sorted out. Artificial services to reduce the outages, especially by the Grand Prix, need to be considered and implemented as a priority. I am concerned around the direction of a place like MSAC, as Councillor Pearl pointed out, and what's going on there with its refocused management, focusing on the elite rather than the community, and is actively ceasing the concession options for the frail, injured and elderly participants. While it's a bit unrelated to the Albert Park submission, it does make me fear for what might occur if we don't have a master plan that's a place for everyone, that actively seeks out a park for everyone in the community. I am supportive of the 25-year vision. I also agree that it's well overdue, and the changes we are anticipating in the next 25 years will transform. So I do think we need to think about what it's going to be like in 25 years. It's not going to be like it is today. Perhaps this plan is a doable plan. I actually don't think it's a visionary or transformative plan. Perhaps that opportunity's been lost. Nonetheless, it's what we've got. I am supportive of Council's request for indicative timelines for when each project will be implemented. I think that's a really sensible outcome coming forward. So I'm supportive of the officer's recommendation with Councillor Brown's slight change, and I'd also like to thank the work that the officers has done in such a short period of time. Thank you. Councillor Gross, would you like to close?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I really welcome your observations, which well put some of my views. As I ride through Albert Park, I have two feelings. First of all, I mourn the decrepitude that is evident in some of the paths and places in Albert Park. And then last night, after playing volleyball at MSAC and riding home past the courts, the tennis courts, they were chock-a-block, and my heart filled with joy because I understand once again that infrastructure matters. We need to support community infrastructure with adequate investment. And it was interesting that some other tennis courts were pretty empty, but the new ones that we just fixed up were chock-a-block. So infrastructure matters, and I really welcome this opportunity to reinvent the park. It really needs a lot of love. I'm really excited about the bridge idea. I'm really excited about the expansion of the lake, and I'm really realistic too, as Councillor Bond talks about, some of the suggestions. I endorse what Madam Mayor says about the golf. I was surprised how articulate Mr Armstrong was, and endorse a lot of his comments. And I just want to say on those, it's really important that we somehow make as Councillor Brand's amendment with its deliberate lack of programmatic specificity, we really make it accessible to the other side of that traffic sewer. But I accept what Councillor Bond says, that we're not going to get 4 at-grade crossings. That's not going to happen to such an important arterial road. But master plans can be aspirational documents. They don't actually have to be right. They're a way of trying to capture high-level thinking, and if some stuff is a bit ambitious, well, that's a shame. So I think that in the grand scheme of things, our office has done a great job in trying to get the best for us from this hopefully implemented master plan. I think the timelines are really important. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gross. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried. Councillor Copsey has called for a division, so I'll put that motion again. All those in favour? All those against? Oh, sorry. All those in favour? Councillor Copsey, Councillor Brand, Councillor Simic, Councillor Voss, Councillor Gross, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Baxter. All those against? Councillor Bond and Councillor Pearl. That motion is carried. Right, we'll move on to 12.2, which is the Peanut Farm Pavillion and the netball/basketball court upgrade tender award. Councillors, there's no members of the public that have requested to speak.
Mine's done that. Has it gone blank?
Okay, so we've got no members of the public. Are we focusing? Councillors? Got no members of the public. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers? There are none. So we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover for that or something different? Councillor Baxter to move. Councillor Simic to second. Councillor Baxter, would you like to speak? No. Councillor Simic?
Just to say, really, that this is an incredibly important project. Glad Council's committed to it and working with the increase in costs as much as possible, and also that the state government's contributed. This upgrade is important and look forward to seeing it come to fruition.
Thank you, Councillor Simic. Anybody else wishing to speak? Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried. Now we'll move on to item 14.1, which is the outcomes of the Audit and Risk Committee meeting, 17th of November 2017.
I'm happy to move.
Councillors, we have no members that have requested to speak. Councillor Gross wants to move. I'm happy to accept that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Baxter? Councillor Gross, would you like to speak?
No, I think it speaks for itself.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter? Would anyone else like to speak to the report, the motion? No? Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried. Councillors will move to 14.2, which is the mid-year financial review, 2017-18. Do you have any questions of the officers? No? Then do I have a mover for that or something different? Councillor Baxter to move. Councillor Crawford to second. Councillor Baxter, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And we have a lot of councillors with surnames starting with B's and C's, so I do feel sorry for you. Basically, this is a really important thing for our council to be doing, to constantly be reviewing our financial position and identifying where things need to be changed. So, although we may not have a whole lot specifically to say at this council meeting, I think I speak for all the councillors when I say we all have read this very carefully and have been very much up on the changes that need to be made and what we need to do as we prepare to go into the next budget build.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Councillor Crawford, would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Copsey.
I'll just note that these updates are part of our commitment to the community's desire for increased transparency and visibility over how council is spending ratepayers' money and other revenue. And it's a really good opportunity. It's a good opportunity for the community to scrutinise our actions. They're not here tonight, but I'm sure they're all watching on the live stream, riveted. Things do change. We go through a very comprehensive process in Port Phillip at the start of the year at the start of the term to set our budget and our 10-year financial outlook this time round, which was a very comprehensive process that had a lot of opportunity for community engagement. And though we do our best to come up with a budget that's going to be workable over the course of our term, things change and opportunities arise, and the opportunity highlighted at 3.2 of the recommendation to participate in planning scheme amendments program for Fisherman's Bend is a really crucial one, that council spending the money now to participate in that process can secure much better outcomes, I hope, for future communities in Fisherman's Bend and current communities as we go through a period of change in that area. So I just urge people to make use of these documents. They are there for the public and for councillors to be open and to be in constant communication with where finances are going in the municipality. And I want to thank the officers involved in preparing these documents. They're always very transparent, very open about our challenges and our opportunities, and they're actually really interesting.
Thank you, Councillor Copsey. Would anyone else like to speak? Then I'll also just note, well, first of all, to thank the officers for such a comprehensive report. And I fully support the additional budget for proper representation at the planning panel for Fisherman's Bend. I think the risk is far too great to do otherwise. And it's really quite disappointing that this has arisen, but it's really important that we defend our position because I'm hoping that will mitigate the risk and inappropriate or unclear controls. I'd also like to congratulate the officers on the significant savings that's been identified on a number of projects. It's the first time I've had any visibility of some of the projects that have come in under budget. So that was really fantastic. And so, added up roughly, I think it adds up to about $1 million. So well done on that. So thank you. Councillor Baxter, would you like to close? No? Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. 14.3, Kiosk 2, 6 Jacka Boulevard. It's a revision of proposal for a new lease. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers? Councillor Pearl.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Has there been any change in the way that we view our procurement process? This is not a procurement process, this is a tender process following this result. So Councillor Crawford and I raised some concerns at the last meeting when this was considered, where we indicated that perhaps the best outcome wasn't being put here and that couldn't shine through in terms of the criteria. So it appears to be on this one we've picked the best financial option but not the best operator. My question is there any changes to the tender process to bring those elements out to the fore where the officers might consider an alternate recommendation? That's the first question. The second question is, do we do any financial due diligence on the previous person that we awarded, was successful in the tender, to determine whether or not they could pay the rent or they had a business model that would accommodate that sort of rental bill?
Thank you, Councillor Pearl. Mr Langhorne or Mr Carroll? Mr Carroll.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I can probably answer the first part of the question and Mr Langhorne could probably respond to the second part. In terms of the first part, it's not necessarily the process that's the issue. The leasing process is like a procurement and there are really clear guidelines and policies about how we work through that. In this particular case, the question that I think is posed was the weighting right in terms of the financial criteria versus the non-financial criteria. The officers at the time, so nothing's changed from the officers' view of the information they reviewed at that point in time. The tenant, the proposed tenant has withdrawn their application for a number of different reasons. Having said that, I have asked the officers to go back and review whether the weighting is correct in these processes in the future and to be mindful of that.
Thank you. Mr Langhorne, do you have anything else to add?
Through you, Madam Mayor, just with regards to the checking of the financial status of the approved applicant, we do undertake that process just to check the credit history of the entity, just to check there's no bad debts or anything left aside. So that is definitely considered.
Thank you. I think the question also was the business plan. Like, are they paying too much money that they can they recoup that? Do we look at the business plan?
Yeah. Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, there is. They are submitting basically what their business is about. We do ask for detail as to what their business model is that they propose to run, and they will be justifying their existence within that, and that would have been seen to be suitable by the officers at the time.
Thank you. Councillor Crawford.
Mine is just to clarify around some of this as well. I wondered in the weighting of what we look at in a tender process, because I know that there have been a few instances we've been talking to various people around, whether there is a weighting for commitment to the area and ongoing, trading long-term in the area, whether that gets consideration, that they have been long-term traders. I know it would only be a small portion, but perhaps that is something to consider, that they have had a previous history of working long and, hard in this community. So I just wanted maybe that at some stage that could be a consideration.
Mr Carroll, are you able to see whether that could be added to the list of criteria?
I can look into that further.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, councillors? If not, we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover for that or something different? Councillor Pearl to move, Councillor Crawford to second. Councillor Pearl, would you like to speak? Would anyone else like to speak? Looks like it's you, Councillor Pearl.
Thanks so much. This is another example of where we have to level our leasing policy up. across the municipality. On one hand, we have some community leases which don't go out to tender at all, and it's very difficult to work out the value that those community organisations give to our community compared to whether or not there's a better alternative for our community. We don't require them to jump through these hoops. Then we require some commercial businesses to jump through these hoops, and on neither side of the equation are we getting good outcomes for our municipality. We've had an empty building there for 3 months now. We've lost $30,000 in rent. The upkeep of the building's come down, and we've burnt through summer for somebody to run a business there. These tender processes have to have a human element to them, and I'll implore the officers to not be afraid to say this isn't the best commercial outcome for the council, but we know this person has a track record, we have a relationship with this person, we want to do business with this person, and we recommend something that isn't perhaps the best commercial outcome. So don't be afraid to do that would be my advice, because we're really already doing it on a number of community leases that we have on buildings across the municipality. Happy to support the officer's recommendation, and looking forward to seeing what happens with that site, and hope it moves forward as we go on. But there's obviously some lessons in here that we can all take forward and hopefully improve the process.
Thank you, Councillor Pearl. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, 14.4, Assembly of Councillors. Any questions of the officers? Happy to move. Councillor Copsey, so just to note that there was an adjustment, yes, to the report. Councillor Copsey to move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Baxter to second. Would you like to speak to the report? No? Would anyone like to speak to the report? If not, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried. 14.5, which is the City of Port Phillip 2018 Victorian State Election Advocacy Priorities. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers? If not, we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover for that or something different? No? No movers. Oh, okay, Councillor Baxter. Sorry, I didn't see your hand there. And Councillor Brand to second. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Baxter?
Look, I'll just speak briefly. Basically, these are a number of advocacy points for us to take to the state election, to various different parties and candidates, to talk about the things that we would like to seek in the upcoming campaign.
Thank you. Councillor Brand.
Yes, I think it's an important document for us to develop, of course, and I'm happy with the 11 priorities that we've brought forward into prominence. I note that we're also expecting the rest of the document to be redrafted a bit. I think the way it was written before had all of the content right, pretty much, but it was very mildly expressed and very... It needed some strengthening in the way things were put, and some more imagination in the way things could be framed to make them more appealing to people at the state government level, and more persuasive and compelling. So I look forward to that being done. But I think that our list of 11 key issues, key asks, actually goes some way to doing that anyway. So that's great.
Thank you, Councillor Brand. Anyone else wishing to speak to this motion? Councillor Copsey.
I'll just reiterate for those playing at home that this is not a full list of the items that Council will be advocating for during the 2018 lead up to the 2018 state election. This is noted in 3.3 of the recommendation. However, these are some that we're very, very keen to highlight as opportunities to partner with the state and produce some really significant and beneficial projects that were not just, in many of the cases on this list, they're not going to just be beneficial for the City of Port Phillip, but they're going to make life better for people in our region and beyond.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. Councillor Baxter, would you like to close? Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. So we'll move to item 15, which is a notice of motion. So 15.1 notice of motion is from Councillor Copsey, and we have received one request. Teresa Warren, please calm down. If you could address Council, please.
Teresa Warren, South Melbourne, formerly off St Kilda, and I've still got a soft spot for St Kilda, although I've been living in South Melbourne now for 15 years. Well, this motion was one of the issues that's been going through my mind since the last council meeting, and it was going to be a question I was going to be asking when the alcohol ban on the foreshore next came up or came to council. So I have to thoroughly agree with Councillor Copsey's motion. I think it is important that a glass ban is in place along the foreshore, the beach area, from one end from Elwood to Port Melbourne. I think most of you will realise that broken glass, or whether it's how big or small, can be used as a weapon, and also small pieces of broken glass is very hard to be picked up from grass areas and from the sand, and I like to encourage you all to vote yes for this motion, and thank you for allowing me the time to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Warren. Councillors, do you have any questions of the... So, actually, before I ask Councillor Copsey to move this notice of motion, I'd like to give you the opportunity to ask questions of the officers in regards to this proposed notice of motion. So, Councillor Pearl.
Just point 4 regarding the budget process. Do we have any idea of how much this motion will cost to implement?
Thank you, Ms Blair.
Through you, Madam Mayor. It really depends on the approach Council wants to take to this. If Council wanted to take a high level of enforcement, it would require significant resources in terms of people, so local laws, so quite significant. So one full-time local laws officer, including all on costs, is probably about $80,000 to $85,000. So that's a key consideration as to how you want to actually enforce it. So you could go to one extreme, which is a high level of enforcement and education, which would be a high-end cost, right back to taking a education reactive response. So it really is quite a range, which would be subject to the approach you wanted to take to implementing this.
Councillor Pearl, is that a follow-up?
Yeah, so if the motion passed, it's imperative that this council gives very clear instructions to the officers. So if this motion passed, what approach would you then take to quantify what it would take to implement this? You're saying it's up to us. In some respects it is, but we're voting on a motion here which needs to give you an instruction. How will you work out how to cost that instruction?
Through you, Madam Mayor, ideally you as council would have more information before you make a decision on this, particularly in relation to the finances. So what we would be looking at doing is bringing a report back to you, and at the moment the intention was that would also form part of the alcohol report. We would come back to you with options around this and costings that would come with that at the same time.
Councillor Crawford, did you have it?
So I note that we haven't really enforced at any stage, or very often with local laws, but on the occasions that we have, not necessarily with glass bans, do people take the fines seriously and do they pay them? Because if we're going to fine people perhaps that are visitors to our city, is it like a car park ticket when you get a fine that people just don't pay?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the issuing of local law infringements in public space can be challenging because, for example, if an officer was to ask someone to not bring glass or to remove the glass and the person refused to do that, the officers can issue a ticket, but to issue an infringement, they actually require the name and the address of that person. If that person chooses not to give that information, the officer has no powers to then do that. So in relation to the current trial of the glass bans we have had, is that most people are receptive to, we've taken more of an education approach, and most people are receptive to that. Where it is more challenging is if someone is in an intoxicated state, then our officers would not be approaching them around a glass-related issue or an alcohol-related issue because it's not safe. So that's when we rely on the police for that one. So in an ideal world, you would have no issues, but if someone refuses to give their information, you can't issue an infringement without that detail.
I've also got a question, just out of curiosity. So if we were of a mind to support the motion tonight, but then it turned out we weren't of a mind to support the cost of it, what happens in that situation?
Through you, Madam Mayor, if I may assist, I think you'd have a policy which you can't then effectively implement. So you'd have a policy, but we'd be unable to enforce it, or depending on the level you chose, if you chose a service level which is around education, we could certainly do some of the education. I think the advice we've got to bring back to you actually has to include options on service levels, plus costs and recommendations. So we would, the issue of having as this is worded, you could actually endorse the policy in principle subject to a report coming back, which we'd bring back, I believe, on the 21st of March with some recommended service levels. So if you wanted to be clear on that, you could make a minor amendment to this motion, or if you were to put it through as it is, we would take it as read that you are supporting this in principle, but the enforcement and implementation is subject to adequate resources being allocated.
Councillor Baxter.
Just a clarifying question, doesn't Section 4 deal with that it basically says that planning to implement that additional resources to implement the glass-free areas would be considered as part of the budget process, meaning that will be coming back to us. So I'm not sure that needs an amendment, but I'm just clarifying, is that the case, or does 4 cover it?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the difference would be is that Mr Smith's approach, you would have that information in front of you to enable you to make that decision before it was formally implemented as an ongoing one. This one still puts you in the position of making a decision without knowing what the cost implications would be or what service levels you would like in terms of how you would implement it.
Just another clarifying question. Wasn't a... So the glass ban that was part of that has been part of other motions around alcohol and has been implemented, during peak periods and things like that. So we've passed those kinds of motions without necessarily having to get into all of these sort of confusion about, well, we don't know how much it's going to cost. What is the difference between when we did that and the uncertainty that seems to be coming up now?
So through you, Madam Mayor, so the resolution that was passed at the previous council meeting in relation to the glass ban in the St Kilda foreshore precinct, the report actually noted that to do that we would require an additional 2 local laws resources to do that. So an additional 2 local resources have been procured to enable us to do that. In relation to prior to that, over that January period, we actually reallocated additional local laws resources into that area to enable us to, particularly on the public holidays, to educate and inform people around that. And that has led to a backlog of other local laws related cases. And so also, I guess the difference with this one and that one, this one's across the whole municipality. So the cost and the ability to work out a plan into how we would implement that is significantly more than just if we're just looking at a precinct area.
Any other questions, councillors? Okay. Councillor Gross?
May I foreshadow an amendment? And when do you want to deal with that?
Yeah, we haven't got a motion yet, but understand. So, Councillor Copsey, would you like to move your notice of motion yet, please?
There we are. So I'll read it in full. Yep. So my notice of motion is that Council, 1, from the 1st of July 2018, extends the glass-free areas on the foreshore and, pursuant to Clause 62A, brackets 2, brackets B, of its Local Law Number 1, brackets Community Amenity, designate the area within its municipal district which comprises the foreshore, including beaches, reserves and parkland from Elwood to Port Melbourne and between the Water and State Route 33, brackets comprising Ormond Esplanade, Marine Parade, Jacka Boulevard, Beaconsfield Parade and Beach Street, close brackets, as an area in which glass containers, bottles, receptacles, vessels and like products are prohibited at all times without a permit. 2. Makes amendments to Clause 62A.2 of its Procedures and Protocols Manual 1 September 2013 to reflect this designation. 3. Publishes the amendments to its Procedures and Protocols Manual 1 September 2013 in the Victorian Government Gazette and updates Council's website with these changes. 4. Notes that planning to implement the new glass-free areas will be undertaken by Council officers and that additional resources to implement the glass-free areas will be considered as part of the 2018-19 budget process.
Thank you, Councillor Copsey. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Baxter, please speak to your motion, Councillor Copsey.
So I've brought this motion. We've had some discussions in the chamber recently, and the idea of a glass ban was one that seemed to have a good degree of support when it was last discussed in this chamber. It fell off through the process of a number of amendments at our last meeting, so I'm bringing it tonight to hopefully gain support from councillors to send a signal that glass and the beach don't mix. I think a lot of us know this already, and this motion is to put in place a signal from council that our policy is going to be not to bring glass to the foreshore, parks and the beach itself. It's deliberately open in 4 to set the implementation, for councillors to have the opportunity to address the level of implementation. We often have this sort of process where we have lots of policies and we have to choose the degree to which they're serviced and resourced. There are a number of our local laws that fall into this category. So I'm keen for us to, while the rest of summer is here, send the signal that it's time to think twice about bringing glass to the beach and parks. And I think that we can do that, and that local laws and our officers can take some interim measures, I imagine, like signage and utilising the existing resources to tide us over and come back to us with a more comprehensive plan for enforcement as part of our budget process. I hope I'll have the support.
Thank you, Councillor Copsey. Councillor Baxter.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Look, I'm obviously supportive of the motion. I think that we need to see that the safety issue of glass on our beaches is something that's actually right across our foreshore, and I don't think that it makes sense for us to focus only on one area. It may have more litter than other areas, but glass is glass no matter where you are. So I do think that we need to be looking at a ban, and that we need to resource enforcement of that ban in some way. What I do think is that the item number 4 on this notice of motion refers to basically that we'll come back through the budget process to figure out exactly how we're going to resource this, and this will, I'm guessing that we'll be given options anywhere from, you know, putting up a lot of signs informing people as to what the rules are there, right through to direct enforcement, and we'll decide how we want to go there. But as Councillor Copsey said, we make lots of decisions without necessarily knowing exactly how much those things are going to cost. We make the decision, we then go through the costing process, we find out how much that's going to cost. If it's something, if there's some drastic revelation, we may even revisit it. But I think that this is a good path to go down. It's time to start changing the behaviour of how people treat our beaches in terms of litter, and certainly I'm quite sick of going down on beach patrol and having to pull out broken pieces of glass from the rocks where, you know, my kids playing and stuff like that. I'm quite sick of pulling the plastic out as well, but the glass is a little bit more dangerous, and so I want to do more about that, knowing that this is not going to absolutely solve the problem, but will hopefully be a start in changing that behaviour of how people treat our beaches.
Thanks, Councillor Baxter. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Gross? Oh, Councillor Gross, you foreshadowed an amendment. Would you like to mention that now?
Yes, just an additional item 5. Council calls upon the Australian Packaging Covenant to launch a research and development project on beach-friendly non-glass drink containers that are easily recyclable and safe in a beach environment.
Okay, you might want to say that a bit slower so we can type it up. Council calls on...
Take it over to her?
I've already
I've
sent it.
That should be against the law.
Is that right?
Would you like to read it one more time and I'll see if we've got a seconder?
Okay. Council calls upon the Australian Packaging Covenant to launch a research and development project on beach-friendly, non-glass drink containers that are easily recyclable and safe in a beach environment.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Simic? Councillor Gross, please speak to your motion.
The Australian Packaging Covenant Council is a tripartite body funded by industry, including the Food and Grocery Council, all the major packagers and the retailers, and government. And one of its remits is to assist businesses, both large and small, with design of packaging. And they've done some fantastic things to increase the recyclability of packaging, and I just think it would be interesting for them to think about some of the design issues and about how to make things beach friendly as well as recyclable. So all it is that we write a letter asking them to do this research project, and if they do it, they do it. It might plant an idea for packaging which might be important in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Gross. Councillor Simic, would you like to speak to the amended motion? No, the amended motion which you've seconded? No?
So, is, Madam Mayor, the amendment or the actual motion?
The bit in red,
okay.
which you seconded.
And then when we vote, we'll vote on...
You can speak again,
okay.
Yes, as a whole.
I support Councillor Gross's wise words that he's put into use to put forward a very good suggestion.
Councillor Baxter, clarifying count to who?
For Councillor Gross. Councillor Gross, is there anything in your amendment that could perhaps include something about biodegradable containers? Is that crazy?
Biodegradability is quite complicated, so I've been to quite a few seminars where green campaigners like the Western Australian-based Blue, what's the name?
Tangaroa Blue.
Yeah, Tangaroa Blue are very critical of biodegradable plastics, though. Yeah, so I'm happy to put it in. Bottom line is yes, I accept that suggestion. It's acceptable to me. I do make the observation that biodegradability has been oversold as an answer in plastic bags.
So is recyclability.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Councillor Gross, you've answered the question. Are you suggesting, Councillor Baxter, that it's amendment on amendment, or is that's fairly minor? I mean, you could interpret that's biodegradable in that anyway, non-glass.
It says that are easily recyclable. I guess you just add and or biodegradable.
That's fine by me.
I think it's a fairly minor. So, would you consider putting it in? So, what would be the wording, Councillor Gross? The CEO, you. Okay, and Councillor Simic has agreed to that as well. All right, so that. Anyone else would like to speak to this amendment? Councillor Crawford?
I just wanted to note that I have seen very recently on the shelves that they have started, and this did concern me about the glass ban, started putting Prosecco and wine in aluminium tin cans now. So we're covered at the beach.
Would anyone else like to speak to their motion? Concentrate, please, councillors. No. Would anyone else like to speak to this amended motion? If not, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. So that's now become the substantive motion. Councillor Simic, would you like to speak to the substantive motion?
I just want to add my voice in support of this motion as it stands amended. We've spent a lot of time looking and talking about the complexities of what's happened on our foreshore in recent months and looking at solutions as to how we can overcome some of the problems that we've seen. So this is definitely something that fell off the wagon last week as we were going through amendment on top of amendment on top of amendment to reach the outcome that we got to last week. We've got to look at this issue in a holistic perspective. I think one of the biggest issues on Christmas Day, obviously, was that St Kilda Beach was trashed by people bringing glass to the foreshore and not respecting the foreshore. I think that it would take a while for us to implement something like this properly, but it begins with education campaign, which has already started, and something that we can build on. It does note in 4 that we will have further opportunities to consider this proposal and to consider Council's response to this motion. So I wholeheartedly support it, because if we want to look at how to resolve some of the issues that we've been talking about meeting to meeting, then we've got to look at a holistic approach, and that's certainly what this motion drives us to.
Thank you, Councillor Simic. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Copsey, would you like to close?
Thanks very much for the amendment, Councillor Gross. I think it makes the motion stronger and better, and I'm really keen to see. I think we've got lots of local groups that would be very well placed and happy to participate in a development project like that, like some of our wonderful volunteer organisations who already do so much to clean up. I'm thinking of them as I bring this motion. I go out with Beach Patrol as well regularly. It's just so frustrating to see how much time and energy goes into cleaning up the beach, and I know of a volunteer who does their own beach cleanup and has actually collected kilograms of glass from Albert Park Beach over several years. Well, actually, the amount is kilograms per week. So it is a really big problem. It's one that we know about. What I like about this motion is that it is very targeted to address a known problem, and I think hopefully it will take some of the burden off our community groups who spend so much time cleaning up. It's a lot easier for us and cheaper actually for us to prevent glass breaking on the beach than it is to try and clean it up. So I hope that this in the long run will turn out to be a good preventative solution for council. And thank you, Councillor Crawford, for noting that there are lots of different packaging options now for your favourite beverages. So I think it's a really easy adjustment for people to make. There are so many easily accessible alternatives, and hopefully this will be the push that people need just to start that behaviour change. It's an easy problem if we think about it a bit before taking glass to the park or beach.
Thank you. I'll now put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Well done. Now we'll move to reports by council delegates. Councillors, we've got an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover? Would anyone like to do any reports? Councillor Simic.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do sit as a council-appointed director on the Port Phillip Housing Association, and this report, I guess, goes to a question that one of the members of our public asked earlier, and it's a shame that they're not here still, but hopefully they're watching online, and for the interest of council minutes, I do want to say that the Port Phillip Housing Association is going from strength to strength with its mission to provide housing for people who are vulnerable and without housing. We are faced with a multitude of problems in Victoria, with people not having adequate housing options and opportunities. And one of the big stresses has meant that organisations like the Port Phillip Housing Association have had to do much of the work that the state government should be doing through providing public housing opportunities and further investing or properly investing in community housing associations to be able to broaden the opportunities for people to have housing as a first option. What's happening at the Regal is incredibly complicated and made much worse by the current situation for housing across Victoria. Port Phillip Housing Association and the CEO, Hele, who is the key spokesperson on this issue, has spoken very clearly and openly, publicly, about the work that Port Phillip Housing Association is doing to resolve some of the issues around the Regal, but Port Phillip Housing Association is working with council and a lot of other stakeholders. It's a very complicated issue and one that needs to be addressed carefully, keeping in mind the well-being of the people living at the Regal is an important issue, and the safety of our community more broadly is an important issue. So I'll leave that there. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Simic. Councillor Crawford.
I'll just give a quick one. I'm the representative on the MAV Arts and Culture Board or Committee, whatever it's actually officially called. Working group, I don't know. So that was good. So I got to report back on the month that is the beginning of big festivals in St Kilda. Essentially, we have back-to-back massive festivals. So I reported on that. We were presented by had three different presenters. One on lifelong learning and the importance of it, which was interesting, through neighbourhood houses or and programs across Australia. So that was interesting. Obviously, insurance risks that are facing councils in the age of terrorism and intense weather events and things like that. So that was interesting also to discuss. But quite ironically, I note tonight that I mentioned we got a presentation from a member of the public libraries in Victoria about the changing role of public libraries. Some perhaps embracing it more than others.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've had a few meetings actually as councillor delegate. So most recently it was the Friends of Sawai meeting. They're continuing to do good work, particularly through their village lighting schemes to provide more lights in villages in the Sawai area. And I would only point out that they do have a trivia night coming up, which my colleague Councillor Crawford will be hosting, as she's very good at it. Councillor Gross might decide to be on the same table as me if I let him. And it should be a really, really fun night. The actual date escapes me at the moment, but the 6th of April, and so I urge any of my colleagues, if you're free, to come along. It's a really good time, and yes, you may be able to sit on the same table as me and my dad, Trivia Masters, and hopefully that will be a really good night. Also, recently chaired another meeting of the Multi-Faith Network. Again, really positive discussions about how we can, bring people together across different congregations. But the group also wanted to convey their thanks to Council for a couple of recent motions that we've passed. One was the one that we passed in support of refugees on Manus Island and here in the city of Port Phillip, and the other one was our stand against anti-Semitism, the motion that we passed late last year. So they were very happy about those motions. And finally, and I told you there's been a lot, finally the VLGA, I'm also delegate to the VLGA, and they've been doing a lot of work lately in bringing delegates together to talk about advocacy and priorities for the state election, particularly around when we're talking about inner city councils, about how filling in those gaps in public transport links and hopefully using the bus network to do so. They're also doing quite a lot to inform councillors of the potential changes to the Local Government Act. So they're doing a lot of information sessions on that. So they've been really, really useful in that respect. And again, I encourage any of my fellow councillors to attend any of these information sessions because they're really good value. That's it from me.
Been busy, Councillor Baxter. Councillor Brand.
Just a brief mention with Lyndon New Art, which I'm on the board as a council rep. Tomorrow night there's an opening of an exhibition, a Lyndon exhibition at Tasma Terrace at the offices of the National Trust, which is another partnership that they have struck with another organisation when they're away from home. And it looks like it's a fantastic exhibition of a very interesting artist with a lot of, I think, particularly Jewish traditional roots in her work, I think. But anyway, there it is. It's yet another thing that Lyndon is doing, I suppose, innovatively in the face of difficulty of not having a home for the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Brand. Anyone else? We'll move on to item 17, urgent business. Councillors, do we have any items of urgent business? No? Then we'll move into confidential matters. And we have one item which is confidential relating to the appointment of members to the Community Grants Reference Committee. I'd like to call on a councillor to move that the meeting be closed to members of the public. Councillor Pearl to move. Councillor Gross to second. So in accordance with Section 89(2)H of the Local Government Act 1989, as the item relates to a matter that Council considers may prejudice a person. I'll now put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried. Please wait for the gallery to close.